Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court and CPS issues, as well as other court issues. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, and today I've got a great guest on. Her name is Dr. Sheila Owens-Collins. She's a healthcare executive with over 25 years experience in both Medicaid and commercial managed care markets. Progressive leadership roles in financial modeling, predictive analytics, development and implementation of quality initiatives and cost reduction programs, acumen and strategic positioning, infrastructure development and design, experience in leading an organization through state NCQA and Department of Insurance audits successfully, and coordinating joint venture partnerships, leadership presence that enables successful liaison with state agencies, elected officials, business leaders, community and academic partners, specific depth in understanding of Medicare, Medicaid regulatory requirements, and working with undeserved populations. She's also a mentor for students that are interested in a healthcare career. Now, she's also a single parent of two boys. One is a psychiatry resident at Stanford, and the other is a business major at New Mexico State University. She's also a stepmother of a daughter who is a physician in Chicago in integrative medicine. Now, everything was going great for Dr. Sheila Owens. Life was good until September of 2017. And she's going to tell us more about this. And we need to listen up because she has a lot to say that's highly important to everyone listening. And how are you doing, Dr. Sheila?
Oh, I'm fine, Marianne. And I want to, first of all, thank you for having me on this program. I'm looking very forward to it. And I hope to impart information that people will find helpful and informative and will help them to better plan for their future.
Most definitely, because what is, our future is, we look to the older generation to guide us, but now something bad is happening to the older generation, and you're going to tell us more about that.
Right, I sure am. Yes. So to encapsulate all the credentials that you graciously read out, and I appreciate that. The important point is that I'm a neonatologist, and so most of my career has been taking care of a very vulnerable population of newborns, and now I have learned that the elderly are also just as vulnerable, and so my shift is now that vulnerable population. And the case that I'm going to describe to you has really four major points that I hope to get through, within the time that I have. The first point is the impact of family members who are very jealous and very desperate and cash-strapped. The second point is how the courts can be weaponized against the vulnerable population and against those that try to protect them. The third, which is very important, is APS, that's Adult Protective Services. That's the sister of Child Protective Services, which I've had a lot of dealings with as a pediatrician. I have found that many of these cases, people ending up in the guardianship jungle have come through APS, and so that's a common entry point. And there is a lot of collusion between APS and the courts that people need to be aware of. And the fourth most important point is what I call the tenets of estate trafficking. And this is what my case that is ongoing is about, as well as what I think is happening with the elder generation. Those tenets of estate trafficking include, number one, isolation of the victim. The elder person is vulnerable, and so the first thing that is done is they isolate them from their family members, and if they become aware of the court, they take away all of the rights of the U.S. citizens. And I don't think people are aware of that. My mother wasn't aware of that. She felt it, but she wasn't aware of that. The second thing that happens in order for this strategy to work is that there's always someone in the family that is trying to protect their loved one. And in that case, it was me. And so what happens automatically is that person is defamed, and their credibility is challenged at every turn. My credibility as a doctor, my credibility to advocate for my mother was always turned to some kind of personality defect in me. And there was never any attention to the point that I was trying to make, that my mother needed medical attention. So defamation of the protector is part of the game. And if you're in any part of this process and you find that happening to you, I just want you to know that that's part of what happens, and you can't take it personally. And that should hopefully spur you on to fight harder. The third part, after the first two have been accomplished, the victim has been isolated, the protector is defamed and pushed away, the assets are liquidated. And so that's the third and final form. And that's why we call it, we're calling it now estate trafficking. When you think about trafficking, you think of little girls being trafficked for sex or drugs. But there's a new and bigger form of trafficking of the elders, because they're now getting older. They have sizable assets from life savings, and they're very easy to be taken advantage of. So that's sort of the description of my case.
Now, your case is going on in Harris County, Texas.
That's correct.
And how long has this been going on?
Okay, so it started with Hurricane Harvey. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of that. That was one of the more major hurricanes in Houston. And so that was a time when my family members realized, because my mother was living by herself at the time, that she was especially vulnerable because of that hurricane coming. And so they used that time to start coming around her more often than they ever had in the last several years, to ingratiate themselves toward her. And they convinced her, one of my family members convinced her to put her name on a POA. My mother had a power of attorney that listed me as her power of attorney since 2011 when my dad died. So my niece and my sister and my brother thought this was the perfect time. My niece needed $28,000 for in vitro fertilization. She was in her mid-40s and was childless. My sister and brother had chronic alcohol and heroin problems, and so they were cash strapped. And so they thought this was an opportune time. So my niece coerced my mother to sign a POA that added her name to it. And within 48 hours, she went around to all the banks and collected her records, which is really amazing because that happened on a Friday afternoon. And when I came into town, it had already been done. So when I removed my niece from the POA, 48 hours later, my niece and my other family members retaliated against my mother by screaming and yelling at her, to the point that the police had to be called. They went to APS and made a report on me. And they went to the court and said that my mother was totally incapacitated and needed a guardian. Now, it has been lost in the courts that 48 hours before, when my niece talked my mother into putting her on the POA, she had capacity. But 48 hours later, when she was taken off, she's totally incapacitated. And that stuck for the whole time that my mother was in the guardianship. Because it fits their narrative. Mm-hmm. And so that's how it all started. When I say APS was in collusion, APS notified the courts that they felt that the findings were validated on November 1st. I was contacted once by them on September 27th, and they said, we have this complaint and we need to investigate. So I said, okay, so tell me what you need. I'll send in whatever you need. I never heard from them again. On November 1st, There was no investigation. They sent in a letter to the court saying that their findings were validated. I didn't get that letter until December 8th. So there are all kind of due process issues there. Excuse me. So I'm going to get some water. Can we stop for a second?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to get some water. Okay. Okay. All right, I'm ready.
That's okay.
Where did we leave off?
Well, how old was your mother at this time?
Okay, my mother at that time was 89.
Oh,
she was 88, going on 89, and a very youthful 89. She was like I said, she was living by herself. I had caretakers to come in 6 hours a day to help her with housework and help her run errands and just take her out. But she otherwise was living by herself. And so to go from that to being labeled totally incapacitated, and then a month later, Alzheimer's, and that is never on the chart. I mean, that has never been worked up, or that's never been a diagnosis that a physician has given her. The court-appointed attorneys gave her that diagnosis.
You know, I notice when these court-appointed attorneys give you a diagnosis, like you said, it does stick.
Right. And, you know, and one of the things, one of the things I learned is that it doesn't have to stick, but you have to fight very hard. And it's hard because you have to, at first, it's hard to find a lawyer that's going to fight, because they're all, they're very much all a part of the same club. And so they're only going to go so far against each other, and especially against a judge, which is the biggest part of my story. But yeah, and so they do everything that fits their narrative. So, as I said, every time I tried to advocate for my mother, it was turned against me. And even to the point of really persecuting my mother. My mother was deaf, and she had a cochlear implant, and I had bought her an iPhone so that she could hear better, that paired with the cochlear implant. And the temporary guardian took it away. And despite 9 months of begging her to give the phone back, my lawyers asked her to give the phone back. She never gave the phone back. And so my relationship with my mother and my ability to talk to her was severely impaired. And that's a violation of the American Disability Act. You can't do that to people. And so I'm planning to go up on that. It's just amazing how far people will go, and the misrepresentations that they will say in order to make their point. I mean, their point is to get that person out of the way, get the pesky advocator out of the way, and then liquidate her assets. So
and it's all in the name of money. It's just a money game.
Yes, it is. It's well planned, it's well orchestrated, it happens very fast, and people that are, just kind of stumble into the system, before they know it, they're in over their head. And so if anything, I hope that people will at least be more informed, and they won't be naive, and they will know how to effectively fight, and know how to screen lawyers.
How would you screen a lawyer when you're going through this? When you find this is being dumped on you, you've got to get a lawyer very quickly.
Right, you do. You have to get it extremely quickly. So, the first thing that I did not do that I should have done is to read what the regulations are for the guardianship. Okay, so there's the rights of the ward. There are, there are rules and responsibilities of each of the court-appointed attorneys, and those rules are very clearly outlined, especially the rights of the ward. And so because I wasn't clued into that, I felt that what was wrong was wrong. But then when I read the rights, it was definitely wrong. So so the first thing to do is just to become aware of what the rules of the game are. And then you when you interview your attorneys, you try to ascertain where they are with those rules. My attorneys, there are not, I'm not gonna say my attorneys, but there are many attorneys. I talked to several attorneys as I got further down this road about the rules that are being broken and how the judge was inappropriately using his discretion against my, which was not in my mother's interest. By this time, my mother's estate interest, and definitely not in my interest. And so when lawyers start saying, well, the judges have a lot of discretion, and they a lot of times, they just do what they do. That's not a good lawyer. And if they just start making excuses, well, that's the way the system is. We all are drinking out of a trough. They go into the political backgrounds. The judges are elected. The court-appointed attorneys sort of feed into their elections, and it's just a going back and forth, a good old boys club, and you are definitely out. And so I really just try to find out where they are, what their philosophies are. Mm-hmm. And then my last question, which I didn't ask until at the very end, until I was at that point when I felt that the judge was just ridiculously, in my claim, I said he used judicial rascality. I mean, he was just off the chain. And I wanted to bring an action against him. I wanted to stop the momentum of channeling all of my mother's estates to the state. And we were at the very last stage of that, which was assigning the executor of my mother's estate to the person that she wanted to be assigned to. And so this judge just arbitrarily said, no one in the family is qualified to be an executor. And there was no one in the family that was listed except me. So, he didn't say my name, but I was the only one in the room that impacted. And so my son was second up, and he said, he can have his day in court, but, nobody's going to get it. I just thought, that was so personal. And that disqualification was just, it was like a stab in the heart. It was just so unfair, so personal. And the fact that even my son, who is, just totally innocent, he wasn't going to get it either, because the judge used the excuse of family rancor. He said, it's just too much family rancor, so nobody's going to get it. And that was his excuse to just keep it going to the state. And there happens to be a Supreme Court ruling on family rancor and the testator, and complying with the testator's wish for their who executes their will. And the Texas Supreme Court has said that family rancor is inconsequential, that the court should comply with the testator's wish. And so I used that before my son had his hearing to be the second executor, and with knowing the fact that the judge has already said he wasn't going to get it. So I wanted to bring an action against the judge, and I called all over Texas and could not find a single person to do it. So I filed pro se a lawsuit against the judge, and then I filed a pro se motion for his recusal, and I was successful. And wow. That's one of my biggest, that's one of the proudest things in my life. It was the hardest, okay, because I got a lot of backlash from my lawyers, from all the lawyers. I have a lot of lawyer friends. My ex-husband's a lawyer. I got a lot of backlash from all of my lawyer friends. But I just felt that this was my mother's last wish, and I want to do whatever I for it to be honored, as extreme as it could be, and whatever consequences I could face. I mean, I was told I could be sanctioned. Nobody told me I would go to prison. So I said, okay, if I don't go to prison, then okay, then I can do it. Yeah. Or if it's not a capital crime and I can be executed, I will do it. But the general notion is, the judges have immunity, and they have global immunity, and so they can do what they want, and that's the attitude. And my attitude is, I'm in medicine, and medicine is very hierarchical, just like the legal profession and many other professions. And there's no position in medicine that is unaccountable to anybody. That is, that you can say, I can do what I want because I'm who I am. There is no position in medicine like that. Everybody is accountable, and everybody is owed, due process, and everybody is owed fairness. And you can't say, I'm the judge. So that's it.
Right.
So the end of this long journey is that a new judge came in, and he looked at the facts, and my family members flipped and flopped and lied and lied and lied. I mean, their lies just got comical because they were really trying to, to block my son. But at the end of the day, and I also have to say that, my son was very gracious. He, I think he put the judge's fears at ease when he said that he realized that part of the resistance to him becoming the executor, because he was my son, was that they were fearful. And they were very fearful that he was going to exact vengeance on them because of what they had done. But he promised the courts that he would be fair. He said he had not really been involved with the conflicts with my siblings, and that he would be fair and he would obey my grandmother's wishes. And so at that point, the judge appointed him the independent executor. He dismissed the temporary administrator, and that was one of the happiest days of the year.
I'm sure that was a major triumph when you went pro se and you handled this. When you went pro se, how long did it take you to accomplish all of those two actions?
Oh, it was very short because I didn't have a lot of time. So let's see, the hearing where he declared that I was disqualified, and at the last minute he said my son he could have his day in court, but he wasn't going to get it, was around September 25th. And so he said, in 45 days, we will have a trial on my son's application. So I had 45 days. So it took me a week to just get up the nerve and talk to other people. But there are two really important people that really helped me through this. Three. Those are my first cousins, and Juliet. I think you know Juliet Fairley. She has been just unbelievably supportive, and she and my cousin Donnie Owens and cousin Regina Owens, I mean, they really held me up. I had panic attacks in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, and I could always call them, and they would pull me back from the ledge. Because when I read the statistics, only 90% of judges do not recuse themselves. 91% don't recuse themselves. Only 9% do recuse themselves. And so then the question is, if he doesn't, what's going to happen? It's that old saying, if you shoot the king, you better kill him. And so,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because otherwise he comes back, you've asked him to recuse, you've sued him. I mean, you have hell to pay. And so, I took that chance. That was again, the most courageous chance that I took, and it definitely worked out.
Now, I have found that taking chances has paid off too, as well. I'm glad you did
Mm-hmm.
that. I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are afraid to go pro se, and what your issue is really huge. I mean, this is a big problem, and for
Right.
you to go pro se, how stressful was that? And I'm glad you had a lot of family, support there. But did you have other coping skills that helped you through this?
Yes. So I I started meditation, and my son being in psychiatry encouraged that, and that has been extremely helpful. I've always gone to church, but I in this past 2 years I have really deepened my faith and made church going and my spiritual nurturing a priority. And then I also engage a therapist to talk to them, because it really is overwhelming to see so many people hate you so much at one
Yes.
time.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I sent a cartoon to my lawyers. And this woman with her hands were out, and they're just arrows all over her,
Mm-hmm.
front, back, in her arms. And I said, this is the way I feel. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel pummeled. And
Right.
it's not an easy feeling. And so I engaged a very helpful therapist to sort of help me to process those feelings and really to give me the strength to keep going, because to the point that it was really ugly and it was really bad, I had to I interpreted that as being it's very important, because if it wasn't important, that wouldn't be happening to me.
Right.
And no one would pay attention. But
Mm-hmm.
because so much attention was paying for it, and there was so much effort put into defaming me, putting my mother away. I mean, it was so the momentum, the numbers. I mean, we were clearly outnumbered, and the rules that were just blatantly broken to
Mm-hmm.
our disadvantage was really overwhelming.
Right. And
Yeah,
you're fighting so hard for your mother, and the stress of fighting and wanting to win and get this sorted out so she could have, you know, a peaceful existence.
right, right.
What happened with all that through
So,
this process?
okay, so it became crystal clear to me. So part of my issue is, my mother had a heart problem that was only worse when she was put in isolation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she was in the hospital, and my doctor told me that she was going to have cardiac rehab, and they were getting ready to do a procedure that would help her with her breathing, which clearly indicated they thought that she would, she has a lot of that she wasn't a total incapacitated person. She had a stroke, and 9 months into it, and died 2 months later. After the stroke, the medical power of attorney was taken away from me, which I also will have an issue with, and the temporary guardian had the medical power of attorney, and she was totally incompetent to make medical decisions. And it was, I can't tell you how irritating that was, to have to talk to her, and she didn't even know the terminology. She called my mother stroke a tumor. And she caused my mother to have that Alzheimer's label. And so and then she was forced into hospice.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to stop it. I was just helpless because I didn't have the authority. The authority was assigned by the courts, and that's who had the control. Yes.
It's like they're a steamroller. They go over you with there's no due process.
There's none. There's no due process. Yeah, I have a
As
claim against APS for that.
mm-hmm. Well,
And there are
I'm
worse
glad.
cases. I mean, go ahead.
Oh no, I said I'm glad you have a case against them,
Right.
and I'm sure that is also stressful as well.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yes, it is. Because, I mean, okay, so being on the executive side, I understand those agencies. They're understaffed.
Mhm.
There are lots of cases. There's a lot of turnover within because of, the people that they get in, they pay minimum wages, so they're only there for a little while. There's not a lot of training. So there are some infrastructure problems that I'm not taking personally, but they do exist. I've had a lot of interactions with CPS as a neonatologist. And, we were always constantly frustrated by cases that they refused to take, even though, we thought that they were really cases that needed attention because they just didn't have time. And so, the best example, when babies came in that were addicted to drugs, that automatically was a CPS consult. But
Mhm.
it became so frequent that they don't do it automatically anymore.
Mhm.
And those babies are still at risk. So I understand the infrastructure problem. However, they are hurting a lot of people, and I still hear stories. I mean, even recently of of people that have gotten deemed with no due process, no investigation. They just come up with their findings, and it hurts people professionally, personally, and especially in my case, when I'm trying to help my mother, it was catastrophic.
Oh, I'm sure. Your case is, I know there is a movie on Netflix called I Care a Lot, but it
Yes,
seems like your case is worse than what they were showing in this film on Netflix.
there are a lot of similarities, but I think in many cases, my case was worse.
Oh
Yes.
yes. Oh, how sad. I mean, your
And
poor
and
mother.
their case is worse than mine. I mean, you can
Mhm.
believe that. Yeah.
Oh, oh, I believe there's always another case worse than yours, or
Right. Right.
it's
Right.
it's just disgraceful what has happened to the legal community and the judiciary
Right.
to
Right.
do this to people and not see through these personality disorders that are interfering in family matters.
Right. And interfering with the court's view of the situation and fair adjudication.
And they don't care. It seems like they don't
And they don't
care.
care. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, and that's really sad.
Now,
It's really disillusioning.
right. Did you have to take off a lot of work for, going into court a lot, or were you not in court that many times?
Um, I would say we were not in court that many times. And this was so then the pandemic came, and then all the court hearings were by Zoom, which made it
Okay.
a lot easier.
Was that
But working
stressful as
became
well?
difficult. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
working was difficult. I'm sorry. Yeah, working was difficult because I'm in a critical care specialty, which demands that you are feel that you're at the top of your game at all times because you have to make quick critical decisions of babies that are critically ill. And
Mhm,
so I had to work very hard to maintain my concentration.
mhm.
Um, and that's where family support and meditation and the spiritual nurturing that I took upon myself really helped.
Mhm.
But it was extremely stressful.
Do you find yourself telling everyone your story that you meet, um, if they should start talking about, a loved one that's elderly?
Yes, I do.
Mhm.
Initially, it was hard because it always took me back to what I had gone through. But as time has gone on, and as I have really searched for the purpose of this experience and my purpose going forward, I think that I am obligated to share my experience with other people in the hopes that it will help.
Mhm.
And so, and that brings me to, other things that I'm doing. Um, as part of my healing and as part of my raising awareness to other people, is I'm forming a nonprofit organization in my parents' honor. And the sole purpose will be to raise awareness of elder abuse, to form a political action committee to really work with legislatures, because that's where the changes have to come, to be a political action committee that will work actively with legislation at the state level as well as the national level, for reforms in the adult and child protective services as well as the guardianship. And then the other part that is very stressful is the cost to fight. And that's why many people give up, because they just can't afford the $300 an hour legal fees that it costs to fight this case. And so that's the other mission of the nonprofit that I'm going to form, is to hopefully be able to provide financial assistance to people that are in really bad situations and they can't afford to fight it.
Do you have a name for your nonprofit yet, or are you?
Yes, and so it's going to be, there's going to be two. There's going to be a 501(c)(1), which is the part of the nonprofit that when people make contributions, it's tax deductible, and the other one is a 501(c)(4), which is the political action committee. So the 501(c)(1) will be the Hattie and Emil Owens, Foundation for. Hold on, to stop that. Let me get the exact name.
That's okay.
Yeah, let me get the exact name. That I don't want to stumble on that part.
How do you spell the first name too?
Okay, it's Hattie.
That's what I thought.
And Emil is EMIEL.
Okay, Hattie Emil Owens.
Yeah, the Hattie and Emil Owens Foundation for. It has to do with, and I have it exact. I want to get that to you, even if you have to put it in later. The first one is the Foundation for Elder and Estate Respect and Protection, because those are the two things that are missing: respect and protection, estate protection, elder. So it's the Hattie Emil Owens Foundation for Elder, Respect, and Estate Protection.
Okay. And
the other one is a Hattie and Emil Owens Political Action Committee for estate, for guardianship, for APS guardianship and probate court reform. Okay.
So now when you have those, what do you do with them next? You just present them to, I mean, I don't mean to sound stupid, but do you present them to
okay.
Do you present them to legislators?
Yeah, so first I have to really just get the word out. And the next thing I'm doing to help get that word out is I'm writing a book.
Oh, good.
Yes, and so to sort of, slice this out in the details, that people will need, and they can go to the part that they need. But I'm writing a book that hopefully the funds will help fund these nonprofits. But your question is, what is the next step after you form it? And so the Political Action Committee will immediately get involved with other organizations that have similar interests, like the AARP and all the elder associations. There are other, at least two large associations against elder abuse that have been founded by people that have been involved like me, and so I will join with them. And I happen to have a cousin who was a representative from Utah, and my mother was his aunt, and so he has taken this very personally, he was also an NFL player, and the NFL players who got the settlement from that concussion suit,
Mm-hmm.
who are now in their 50s and 60s and are at the age of having, some issues, are a very big target for abuse,
Oh, I
for
bet they
estate.
are.
And so he has one of his teammates is in this battle too. I mean, his teammate was just moved out of the house. I mean, a disgruntled caregiver reported to APS that the sister that was taking care of him was abusing him. And she was just upset because she was fired. APS came in and they moved that man out of the house in an hour. And she's been fighting for 3 years to try to get him back.
I don't mean to sound stupid, but why can't they go after them for kidnapping?
Because the laws protect them. They're immune. They can say they're acting in the best interest, and they are immune. And so in terms of the reforms that need to take place, in my opinion, I think that a lot of I think that there are cases where people are vulnerable and they need to be protected and they need to be looked after.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it should not be totally in the legal system, because I don't think that the lawyers have the capacity to even make decisions on incapacity or capacity. I mean, I think that the medical community should be more involved in those decisions, as well as social services. And so everything is on the legal system to filter through the family issues, the financial issues, the medical issues, the social issues, and they just aren't equipped to do it. And it's not in their best interest to take the time to figure all that out. It's in their best interest just to close it down, take
Mm-hmm.
the money, and run with it.
What is your stress level now? How do you feel about your health and your stress level now?
Well, I think it's lower because my case it's coming to an end. The APS is still active, but I've just been still on a high from my son being appointed. That was a big win for my family, as well as hopefully it'll give other families hope that
Mm-hmm.
that if they make a will, they can be confident that the courts will respect that will.
Mm-hmm.
And which is what this is all about.
Mm-hmm. Would you encourage other people just to go pro se, or go with an attorney for a while and then go pro se?
Okay, so if they can find an attorney to go against, to go as far as they need to go, and if that's against the judge and if that's against the court-appointed attorneys, I would say yes, because if you can find someone to do it, that's the problem. And then the other problem is the expense. I mean, it takes, people say, well, I'll do it, but it's going to take $20,000 to $50,000
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And at the end of the day, which is the question that you always ask, okay, so where are you going to try to go with this, and what is your strategy, and what is your endpoint? And so at the end of the day, they were going to try to get to mediation with the family members. And so, and it sort of bypassed, the real issue of the wrongdoing of the judge. So, and of the appointed attorney. So I'm hoping that the extreme measure that I had to take will get attention, and that other people coming behind me will not have to make such extreme measures. They'll have the courage to do it if they have to, but I'm hoping that there'll be some reforms in the court, and that the playing field is leveled, and that people will get to spend their last days the way they want to. I mean, we're in an era of patient-centered, or population, people-centered care, and everybody, older people always want to stay in their home. No one really wants to go to a nursing home. And my mother had the financial wherewithal to do that. But the crux to that, to my point, is I have a tape of the temporary guardian saying, she was talking to other people, and I taped it, but my lawyer was there. She said, Mrs. Owens asked me 2 weeks ago when she was going back to her house. She is not going back to her house. We're going to sell that house and attach legal fees.
Huh.
So
that's
the proof in the pudding. That's where they were going.
Mm-hmm. When you go pro se, did you find you had a lot of naivete going into this? Or that you had, maybe when you had an attorney, you had some guidance and you kind of figured out what they were doing and you just picked up their lead?
So it was both, okay, and I would say more fear than naivete going into it. I mean, real fear, because of all, because of the backlash, even for my attorneys. I mean, no one thought that I should do it. They said, this is going to turn out very bad for you. And so, I thought about, okay, so what if I don't do it? Could I live with the fact that my mother's estate is turned over to the state, which is what my siblings wanted. And I didn't even try to stop it. And I couldn't live with that. So, I had, I'd read briefs, and so I'm not a brief writer and I'm not a lawyer, but I was able to put together what, their briefings. And also I had appellate court records, which was very helpful because it really consolidated everything that went wrong. And I found it. And one of the things I will tell you, and I will tell people that, people say, one of the reasons they say you can't go pro se is, they don't like pro se people. They dismiss them. They get no respect, blah, blah, blah. But I found that this judge was really very nice. The judge that was over the lawsuit against the other judge. And so at our first hearing, he told me, your complaint was well written. It was well organized. You did a good job, but it was too long. So I need you to go back.
Oh, no.
Shorten it. Yeah, but that's, that was kind of reassuring. And he was really trying to help me. And, he recommended that I get a private email so that I could get the correspondences back and forth. So that case is still active. I mean, the judge has filed 4 motions for dismissal, and it has not been dismissed. At some point it may be, but I think that I got what I needed out of this incident with him. I got from under his court, and I got my son the executorship.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm just so sorry you had to go through all of this anguish and stress. I'm sure that wasn't good for your health either. Right.
Yeah. But I can't tell you, how that has just totally boosted my confidence. I feel like I can do anything now. And that was good because the processes before tend to, really take a stab at your psyche.
Oh, yes.
Definitely. So this really helped me to bounce back and to let me know that I was on the right track. And I think, my mom is in heaven smiling. I think she is very pleased.
Oh, I'm sure she's very proud of you. A lot of people wouldn't, have the nerve to do this, to take matters into their own hands and keep going.
Right. Yeah. I've never felt pushed into a corner like that. Never. Oh. There's no situation in my life up until now that I felt so backed in the corner with no options but that one option.
Oh my goodness.
And the other lesson is, and you have to make that on a case-by-case basis. My attorneys would say, you put up a good fight. It is the way it is. It's okay. it's okay if they assign it to the administrator. And it wasn't okay. So, my lesson is, you always have to, you can take other people's advice, but you have to follow your heart. If something is not okay, don't let anyone try to convince you that it is.
Right. And I remember Oprah saying, follow your gut instinct.
Right.
And
Right. You do. Right. And that was never okay with me. It wasn't okay that I was disqualified, because I was the most qualified of them all, and that was who my mother wanted. And it wasn't okay to appoint everything to an administrator, which would put it back into the state.
This is just a mind-blowing story, and I'm so glad I had you on. Is there any other words you'd like to tell people?
Okay, so yes. So I have some advice that I would like to share. Okay, the first is I'm a pediatrician, so I have a lot of experience with raising kids. I have my own kids, and then my business is helping parents to raise their kids to be not only physically healthy but emotionally healthy. So my first advice to parents is to pay attention to sibling rivalry in their family. In most cases, it's benign. People outgrow it, and there's no residual in adult life. However, if they think at all that it is too protracted and too intense, to get help immediately. Because if it's on a pathologic route where there's just a real divergence in the behavior of one sibling toward the other, don't think it's going to go away. It only gets worse. They don't grow out of it, and it becomes more irrational in time. So my first advice is to parents to pay attention to your kids and their relationships, and talk to them, about end of life issues and what you want to happen. The second point is you can't stake every important outcome on your lawyer. Realize that they have to make a living and face these judges over and over again, and therefore they will not go the extra mile for a single case that may alienate them from the judge. So you have to anticipate that your case may get to that point, not only to the judge or to the court-appointed attorneys, but anybody that's within the court cabal, as I put it. You need to talk to your attorneys, and see what their background has been, see how vigorously they fight for the rights of the ward in the court, as opposed to go along with the judge. That's very important. The next lesson is our advice: never accept from your lawyers what is unacceptable to you. So in my case, I felt that no one knows or loves my parent as I did, and no one is committed to carrying out their wishes and preserving their estate as I am. So, to that extent, if your lawyers are less committed, and you can't blame them, it's not their mother or their estate, you have to take that into consideration when you're taking their advice. The last one is don't be afraid to do whatever you have to do to live with yourself, and be satisfied that you have done everything that you can do to love and honor your parents. And so, for example, the hardest thing that I ever have done, and I've said it before, the most courageous was to use the judge pro se, to sue the judge pro se, and file a motion pro se for his recusal. But that led the way to my mother's wishes being honored. My son was named as independent executor of her will, and in the end, her last final wish on this earth was complied with. She wasn't able to get out of the guardianship, but she fought hard. She was very faithful, and she was just a stalwart. She was a soldier. So I'm happy that I was able to get that last wish for her.
Now, how can people reach you if they have any questions regarding guardianships or their own something going on in their family, how can they reach you?
Okay, I am very open to talk to anyone who has any questions, or if they have any questions about guardianship or probate or what's going on in their family. My email address is the best, and if you could just send me an email and give me your contact number, I will be sure to do that.
And I'll
Because
put,
it helps me to help other people.
definitely. I will put that in the notes, but can you say what your email is?
Okay, my email is SOWENSCOLLINS, all one word, @gmail.com.
Okay. I thank you so much for coming and talking to me about all of this so we can get the word out of what's
Sure.
going on in families and
Mm-hmm.
probate courts. This is terrible. This is like the worst nightmare.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
or yeah, or at
It's
least
an
one of the
epidemic.
worst. Yes, it's an
Yeah.
epidemic. I'm sure it's global. I'm sure.
Yes, probably so. Yes. And thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to tell my story. I really
Oh, good.
appreciate it.
Most definitely. Don't jump off, okay? I'm going to
Okay.
read the outro, okay? Slam the
Okay.
Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms that in turn perpetuate parental alienation. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again. I'm sure I will have Sheila back on and other guests for another exciting episode. Thank you again, Doctor.